All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 30th, 2015. And this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Tuesday. It's 64 degrees and mostly cloudy and wet, damp, and cold here in upstate New York. I don't think I'm going to have a chance to see it tonight, but if anybody is paying attention to the sky tonight, and I think it's right around dusk. Actually, if you give me just a second, maybe I can make my fingers do the walking. I think it is right at sunset, beginning of dusk today. First time in over 2,000 years we see a double star in the sky. Yeah, just after sunset. Jupiter and Venus are going to come together in this massive conjunction, and they'll look like this massive glowing planet tonight. So if anyone has a clear sky, I think you look toward the moon, looking west. Toward where the sun was. Looking west at 9 p.m. Eastern on June 30th, you should be able to see the Jupiter-Venus conjunction, and it'll look like a big glowing star. I've seen it a couple nights. It's been going on this whole end of the month where they've been getting closer and closer every night. But, yeah, it's supposed to culminate tonight. So anyway, anybody who gets to see it, see if you can get some pictures. I was able to get some off my phone, which was amazing. Of course, it just looks like two little dots in the sky. But anyway, so where did we leave off yesterday? We titled the show. Actually, the show ended up with two titles. The first title was Global Trade Agreements Screwing Us So Many Ways Forever. But then I was like, nah, I talked about more than global trade agreements. So I tried to change it. And once you put it in, YouTube doesn't let you change it. So I did change it, but it has two titles. It was titled then the second time TPP, Church Facial Recognition and New Blood Robots. Remember, we talked about those little self-assembling robots are going to put into your blood that form corkscrews and clean out your arteries. I'm so excited. But where I think we're going to continue today, I do have a whole bunch of more Mad Science Gone Man. I actually have this really scary story that we're going to read about that I ran across, and I guess there were some documents that were released out of one of the universities in California. But they published it in Discover magazine, which is what I couldn't even believe, that shows an experiment, and it was fully detailed in California, where our own U.S. Navy sprayed the entire population of San Francisco and the surrounding areas with some sort of pathogen to simulate germ warfare. And people really got sick. And I know I had read a few stories about things happening in California back in those days where they were spraying stuff to people who were unaware. But this was pretty detailed, so we might look at that a little bit later as well. But probably one of the things I want to mention right now is, of course, we have all this chaos that's been going on. The Confederate flag, everybody, you just, like we've talked about, okay, don't fall for any of this. If you listen to Brandon Turbeville, you will understand that a lot of this division is George Soros funded. This is what he calls the color revolutions. And it is all about divide and conquer, get us at each other's throats. So none of us are paying attention to the agenda that they're ramrodding through in different locations. And it's not just one, it's many. I mean, it's coming from every direction right now. If you take a look at what's happened in the last week, it's just, I feel like I'm in a blender, and add to that, summer vacation. So now I have, I have to be cruise director during the day and try and run the network and do everything else that comes along with that and try and get a show together. And by the way, Fast the Goldfish was dead this morning. Oh, I'm not laughing. But talk about catastrophe. So my whole morning was tears. We had him buried in the backyard. So that, again, trying to prepare for a show with tears and dead goldfish is very difficult. But hey, don't worry about it. We're troopers. Yes, we had Fast the Dead Goldfish. But what's really important today is some of what now you see them setting up as all of this crazy is going on everywhere. We know that Greece, right? Greece has now shut down their banks, shut down the ATMs. I saw a story this morning where they were only going to let them have $67, I think it said, a day. I mean, I don't know. I could live on $67 a day pretty easy. If you had maybe a family of four or six, that might be a little more difficult, but I'm not very extravagant. And when I was in college, I managed to live on like $20 a week and just make big pots of, I used to call it my chicken stuff. Just chicken and lots of vegetables and a little bit of sauce or whatever, and eat the same thing every day for a week. It's the way it works, especially if you don't have any money. At least it's nutritious. Um, but yeah, $67 a day, and everybody's screaming, and they don't know where the money's going to come from. But now, of course, the stock markets. I saw a clip this morning. The stock markets have now tanked, and it was only a 300-point drop. So personally, I don't know, with the levels that it's at right now, that's not so big. If that continues on a daily basis, it might cause some major problems. But of course, a 300-point drop causes people to panic. When people panic, they start pulling money out. When people start pulling money out, you start having a shortage of funds in the financial system, and then they start locking things down. And so I know people yesterday, there were a few of us in chat, and people yesterday like, oh, I don't see how the Greek crisis could affect us. Maybe not directly, but yes, if any type of orchestrated crisis can become even a bigger crisis if they want it to be. And by putting out news items like, oh, the stock market crashed, and oh, people are starting to panic, and oh, that in and of itself could cause us some major problems. So uh, let's play this just so I can get this out of the way, because then there's something coming on the tails of this. As this is all happening, remember, the Confederate flag is still going on. I saw another story this morning about the flag is still flying, despite the fact that some woman climbed up and took it down at one of the state houses. I believe it's South Carolina. They have to do a full vote to be able to take that down. We now have all of these monuments getting spray painted and vandalized with Black Lives Matter. But remember the whole Black Lives Matter thing. That's the one thing that gets me. I have friends from every walk of life, and you guys know me. I mean, I'm all about all for one and one for all. But the thing is, to be able to divide us by color, by race, by religion, which is something that I wasn't brought up. I wasn't brought up that way, okay? I wasn't brought up to see differences because of imaginary lines. I mean, like I've said before, there are good people and there are assholes, and it doesn't matter. Assholes are freely distributed across every religion, color, and country. And it doesn't matter to me where you're from or, what your upbringing was. If you're a cool person, you're a cool person. I like to learn about different cultures and different upbringings and different ways of life. But the fact that this Black Lives Matter became a black versus white issue really disturbs me, because it's not. It was all about police brutality, and there are just as many, maybe not on a statistical scale, but recently, remember, white American males are the number one target now that the FBI and Department of Homeland Security are watching out for, because they are the terrorists, more dangerous than ISIS, and that's what the mainstream told us. So it must be true. Um, just remember that. So we have these monuments, Black Lives Matter, spray painted all over them. And I mean, whatever the history was, it was a part of American history. You can't just go erasing history because all of a sudden now you're, politically correct. And like we said, in the many times we've talked about this, and I have so exhausted this, I don't want to talk about it anymore, but the distraction needs to be pointed out, because I am still hearing hosts like falling into the trap and talking about the division and how they're on their side. Well, it's not about being on anybody's side. It's about being on our side, the side of the people, regardless of what walk of life you're in. If you are one of the ruling elite that is trying to take over the world and exterminate us all and force us to eat radioactive food and removing our labeling to say where our food comes from so you can jam more poisons into our children, then you are an asshole. Okay? You're on that side. But everybody else, let's fight for humanity and fight for being able to be a human being and to live our lives and to be happy and not to be forced into wars and had poisons hoisted upon us. Again, the forced vaccinations and the medical procedures, the tests that are happening that we don't even know about. I mean, step right up and let's get some of this newfangled technology into your blood and see how that little corkscrew self-replicating robot works, Mr. Just had a heart attack and we have you on Obamacare, so we're going to make you an example. It's just very disturbing to me. So anyway, everything is a distraction except for the main event, and the main event is coming, I think, very soon. So here we have Greece now. Greece is in some deep shit. Did anybody know that Puerto Rico is circling the drain? They mentioned that in this clip. We have Wall Street tanking, but don't worry about it because guess what? There's a national holiday coming. It's all about stars and stripes, and we're going to wave some flags and pretend that all is hunky-dory because we are America.
Hold on. Unfortunately, tonight for American 401ks, Wall Street in a free fall, the Dow plummeting 350 points. That's the worst drop all year. Sparked by jitters overseas, Greece on the brink of bankruptcy. And these images from Athens, ATMs boarded up out of cash and long lines at banks. Residents told they must live on $67 a day.
I'm going to stop right there because, like I said, $67 a day. I mean, if you needed to make a large purchase or something, or you had to pay bills, I mean, those $67 a day, mortgage, car payment, okay, that might be kind of tough, but 67 times 30 is kind of a big number. That's like more than $1,800 a month. $67 a day for food, easy. You could do it unless, of course, Greece has $5 tomatoes, which I don't know that. But just pay attention to this because I think there's going to be some major ripples from this. And like I said, whether orchestrated or real, if people start to perceive panic, then other people will panic. And it's like a domino effect.
Now, Puerto Rico, the economy there said to be in a death spiral. ABC's chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, is here. And Rebecca, everyone wants to know what this means for Americans' 401ks.
Absolutely, Amy. And I've been speaking with my sources on Wall Street all throughout the day. They are preparing for more of this volatility ahead. There's actually an index on Wall Street that measures the level of fear in the market, and you can actually see it spiked today by the most all year. That means more volatility ahead, at least until we have some sort of resolution on Greece. But
wow, Wall Street has a fear index, and it spiked yesterday.
Still, it is so important to keep this all in perspective. Our market is still near all-time highs, and even after today's declines, most of those retirement savings accounts, Amy, most of them are basically flat for the year. You have not lost in spite of today's losses.
Whew! So if you had your money invested in the stock market from your 401k, don't worry about it because all these losses, hey, you're flat for the year, so don't worry about it. You made nothing, you lost nothing. So no harm, no foul, but all the rich fuckers got rich. Don't worry about it.
That is a little glimmer of hope there. Rebecca, thank you so much.
Little glimmer of hope. You've made zero. Well, that's the way it's going to be in our future. All right, so let me see here really. Oh, shit. I just closed my other page. So hold on. We're going to go back here because there were a couple more things I wanted you guys to hear about, especially talking about the rainbows. I found something pretty interesting that we should have imagined. But wait, before we get to the rainbows, we're going to get to the red, white, and blue. So as this is all going on, I've seen a couple stories now with them warning about 4th of July attacks. And of course, I mean, every year now for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been expecting something to happen on 4th of July. What a perfect opportunity with fireworks going off and lots of festivities and people celebrating the loss of their liberties, right? Well, here, wait till you hear this.
The FBI arrested a New Jersey man on Monday for plotting to support ISIS in part by financing his brother's trip to the Middle East. Alaa Sadeh could face 20 years if convicted. It comes as the Department of Homeland Security warns of possible attacks in the U.S. over the July 4th weekend.
Now, 1 second. Did you hear what he said? So there was some guy that they arrested for an accomplice to being a terrorist or aiding and abetting a terrorist because he paid for his brother's trip to the Middle East. So caution, you have a friend that comes and asks you to help them pay for a ticket or asks you for money, a couple $1,000 because they're going on a trip. I think I'd be asking some questions. This dude faces 20 years in prison for giving his brother money. But here, now hear how they ramp this up.
Scott Pelley spoke with Michael Morrell, the former deputy director of the CIA, about the threat.
What is the large number of Americans who have been radicalized or in the process of being radicalized by ISIS? We've seen 50 arrests now in the last 12 months, so it raises questions about how many more are out there. Number two is the call by ISIS just last week for people to take up arms against ISIS's enemies during Ramadan. We are right smack in the middle of Ramadan right now.
The Islamic holy month of Ramadan.
Correct. And then third, July 4th is a symbol of America, right? What better to strike than a symbol of America? So you put those three things together, that's why there's so much concern.
We are seeing that threat evolve dramatically as we watch. What is the thing that concerns you the most?
The threat I fear most is a young person in their bedroom, in their basement, radicalized by ISIS, not
Over the internet.
talking to anybody, but taking up arms and committing some kind of attack here, sort of like we saw in Texas.
Did you hear that? He starts out, he's like, there's been such a large number of Americans radicalized by ISIS. But his description, some young American in their bedroom, in their basement, radicalized by ISIS. And of course, we already know that what he's not saying, because they've said it a million times before, radicalized by ISIS over the internet, that pesky internet. Who's going to take up arms for 4th of July. Now, as all of this global economic pot stirring and political pot stirring and racial pot stirring and sexual pot stirring is all happening and everybody is now at each other's throat, wouldn't this be such a perfect opportunity for them to set the game off? Because don't think, with the TPP and the TPA being passed, Obama's got his fast track, they are ready to rock and roll.
In Texas, of course, was the attack on the Mohammed cartoon contest back in May. So how do you put an end to this once and for all?
So, Scott, I think one of the reasons they're
How do we put an end to this once and for all? Well,
so successful at radicalizing other groups and radicalizing individuals is because they're perceived to have the momentum. They perceive to be winning. I think we have to start thinking about putting additional troops on the ground.
The president
what? Putting troops on the ground?
doesn't want to put combat troops on the ground, but in your opinion, that time has come.
I think it's time to start talking about it, yes.
Michael Morrell, former deputy director of the CIA. Thank
Good to
you.
be with you, Scott.
So we have a former. Oops, hold on. We have a former deputy director of the CIA who is going on national television saying the way to fix this is to put more troops on the ground. I don't care what you say, Commander in Chief, pretender. The former head of the CIA thinks so, and he thinks that that's going to fix it all. Oh, yes, that will fix it all. So, guys, I don't know. Keep your eyes peeled. Absolutely. I think that they really are trying to ramp up some major issues for a lot of people right now. And who knows when it's going to happen? It's like round and round it goes, but where it stops, nobody knows. But they really are pushing this one. So here's another thing that we saw I caught this story yesterday and I was like, oh, again from Discover Magazine, someone must be listening to my show. Shooting down drones is now illegal, rules court. Damn! I didn't know that. This is from the 29th, so yesterday. Sure, there is a concern that the emergence of drones will come at the cost of personal privacy because, of course, remember, Amazon, as of mid-July, Amazon is going to start flying their drones. They're doing the tests in Virginia or West Virginia to send medicine from the airport to the people who are receiving free medical care in town, and they're going to use that as their first test bed. It says, sure, there's a concern about the emergence of drones will come at the cost of personal privacy, but that does not mean that we can turn our skies into the Wild West. But why not? One small claims court seems to agree. On November 28th, 2014, Brett McBray, fearing that his family was being watched, had his son shoot neighbor Eric Joe's hexacopter out of the sky with a 12-gauge shotgun in Modesto, California. Although McBray felt the deed was justified, it now will end up costing him a cool $850 and serves as a warning to others looking to take drone matters into their own hands. You know, I actually read that Russia was working on a new anti-drone weapon that was going to be using sound pulses, I believe. There was one time I had shared around an article a few times showing how you could frequency jam drones, but if you pay attention to FBO.gov, where they put out RFPs looking for new technologies, you will know that the Department of Defense is now working on a new kind of navigation that does not require like GPS. It's going to be using a gyroscope so it can physically find its own location in the sky. And that was specifically for that, to protect it against what are they called? EMPs. Thank you. EMPs and interference from outside sources. So it wouldn't necessarily, just by breaking communication with the ground, it wouldn't necessarily take it out. So I don't know if jamming is going to help much anymore on the more sophisticated drones, but just know that maybe, just maybe, sound cannons, if anyone knows how to make one in their basement, that might be a good thing to tinker with this summer. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Target practice. The entire row was first reported by Ars Technica, which obtained an email chain between Joe and McBray following the incident. Joe emailed McBray seeking a $700 payment for his damaged hexacopter, which wasn't even fitted with a camera. Furthermore, Joe claimed that the hexacopter was flying over property that he owned and wrote that he would appreciate the, quote, courtesy of not shooting live ammunition in our direction. McBray's email response was short and to the point. Quote, your facts are incorrect. I am considering the matter now closed. But for Joe, the case was far from closed. And in early 2015, Joe filed a suit in Stanislaus County Small Claims Court. And late last month, the court ruled in his favor. McBray was ordered to pay $850, but has until the end of the month to pay. Now, what they don't address here is that I thought at one point the FAA was looking at putting some sort of federal fines on taking out drones, but it doesn't mention anything in here. Now, this was a personally owned drone, not an official quote unquote Amazon drone that I think we mentioned now a couple shows. It came out about a week or two ago that air traffic control for all these new commercial drones are going to be controlled by NASA and Verizon, a combination between satellite and cell phone towers to be able to triangulate and keep the drones from running into each other. What's so scary about this is that Amazon actually hosts the cloud. And at one point I had read about the CIA, but then there was another point that I had read there were all kinds of alphabet agencies that had Amazon hosted clouds. And the CIA in particular had Amazon create them a mirror cloud to what Amazon actually runs for their own back end. So the CIA has their own Amazon massive back end load balanced cloud that they're utilizing to process all of their information that they're storing up there. So don't think that any of these guys are your friends. Amazon with the big smiley face on the package going to be delivering your instant gratification stuff that you have to buy, all the things that they sell you that you don't need. But Amazon also knows where you live. They got a GPS location on your house, as does the post office. And, when that little droney shows up, and who knows how they're going to deliver these packages, just dump them at your door, or is it going to ding dong your doorbell and get a screenshot of your face, facial recognition to be able to authorize you to remove the package? I don't know. But to me, this is pretty frightening. This is going to be like every nightmare that I had recurring as a child with these drones flying everywhere. They're not UFOs, they're drones. And eventually, don't forget, we already have armed drones over in the Middle East. It's not going to be too long before they are able to put some sort of, who knows? Law enforcement, I know, already has some options. But commercial drones, they're going to have to protect themselves. Maybe they'll put a taser on there for someone trying to steal packages. I don't know. Anyway, back to the drone wars. This certainly isn't the first time man and drone have come into conflict. You know what? If you got just a big net, that might be kind of fun. And, someone brought this up the other day, too. If Amazon drones are delivering packages, how are they going to stop people from stealing stuff? They knock them out of the sky somehow. If you find one of their main routes that they're coming through and you start popping them out of the sky and stealing packages, I'm sure they're going to have HD cameras, but how are they going to stop that? I could just see like mass chaos happening here. This is going to be pretty nuts. Anyway, but this is happening all at the same time that we have economic collapse happening in Greece, the stock market falling, Puerto Rico's going down the drain. Oh my God, your 401k. Oh, the TPP. Oh, Black Lives Matter. Oh, gay marriage. Oh, get rid of the Confederates. Oh, get rid of the flag. Oh, start digging up the bodies. Did you see that? I saw that they were talking about digging up some of the bodies of the former Confederate generals and moving them. Absolute, utter insanity. And this is all over the last week. It's like it became a big zit and now it's ready to pop. And don't think it's an accident. Says anyway, this certainly isn't the first time man and drone have come into conflict. For starters, just Google shooting drones and you'll find a collection of videos, many from Texas. Oh no, poor Texas. They are targeting Texas, guys. Of drones being felled by gunners a year ago, and we watched this video when it came out a year ago. A Colorado man submitted a proposal that would have allowed the town of Deer Trail to issue hunting licenses to shoot down drones. It failed, but the man nevertheless sold hundreds of $25 souvenirs across the country. If anything, the feud between Joe and McBray may cause other drone vigilantes to think twice before pulling the trigger. And if you really want a thrill of shooting down a drone legally, check out Nat Warfare in Arizona. Well, I don't know. It's something that we should pay attention to. I really haven't dug into it deeply, but I thought, so I went to natwarfare.com, G-N-A-T, warfare.com, and on the main page it says, real drones, real guns, real fun. Hey, get out some clay pigeons, people. That's all I got to say. Find yourself some of those survival shiny blankets that don't show heat signatures, because remember, they got IR cameras that they could slap on these puppies. And find yourself a tree stand somewhere. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to deal with all this once they let Pandora out of the box. And Pandora is like chomping at the bit right now. Oh, all right. Well, where do we go from here? I want to get to this germ warfare thing, but I guess before we get there, I saw in California they've been ramrodding this mandatory vaccination and getting rid of any type of religious exemption from any parents that want to bow out of having their children vaccinated. In New York State, I think that it's pretty close to the same as California. I know that they were pushing on getting rid of that exemption, though I still haven't verified if that was just for New York City for religious exemption or if that was for all of New York State. But, we read a whole bunch of stories back a few months ago that it dealt with the FDA research being a bunch of bullshit and how half of the studies that are published in medical journals were proven to be false or manipulated after the fact, yet the FDA never redacted or removed any of those studies. So we don't know even what to trust or believe. We have all these pro-vaccine fanatics pointing to all these studies saying, well, look, of course it works. And then we have all these other studies in the VERS database for the the adverse reactions from vaccines showing a completely different story. And the anti-vaxxers, 100%, I'm going to tell you, I used to look at all the stuff before I had my eyes open and say, man, these people are absolutely insane. And, once you get a kid, it changes everything. And I know people say that over and over again, but as the world becomes a more dangerous place and they're trying to make your child the guinea pig for so many different things and then brainwash them and socially engineer them to whatever their future evil plan is, it becomes a war. The mama bear does not want this to happen to their children. And so when that happens, you become like a laser pinpoint and start digging into the stuff. And oh my God, it is just unbelievable what they do to children. It's all lies. All of it. It is completely fabricated bullshit. And it's all about making money for all these different biopharma complexes and all the rich guys sitting in Congress that are invested in them. Then send your kids over because, we have ISIS under every bed and now in every closet. So, too bad, middle class, that there aren't any jobs for your children that, wanted to go to college or went to college and now have $300,000 in loans that they can't pay because, hey, there are no jobs. But guess what? You can come work for the military and help us fight ISIS. And we'll make sure we give you all the recommended vaccines. We'll make sure we use all of the experimental adjuvants in those vaccines. So when we send you home all broken, then we give you to IBM's Watson that's now running the VA Medical Center, and he'll put you on the death list. Don't worry about it. But hey, if you got PTSD, DARPA will make sure that they figure out a way to delete those traumatic memories and insert some happy ones so that someday in the future we can utilize that on the rest of the American public. Anyway, sorry. I just, my whole view on life is getting to the point where it's just so jaded. The only happiness that I see is when I'm in the woods without any news at all, and I can just pretend that none of this is happening. All right, let's read this story quick. Leading journals. So this is kind of piggybacking on a bunch of the stories that we read about all the FDA fraud. Leading journals agree that most medical research is manipulated. Quote, half of all of the literature is false. Oh, really? Yes, and this is the same literature that your doctor is giving you recommendations on. Corruption in the medical industry can no longer be ignored. And remember, too, Obamacare is not considered a health care plan, and because of that, it is not covered under any of the anti-kickback statutes that they had put into place to protect people on Medicare and Medicaid. So your doctor, by recommending, the newfangled drug that they're trying to test and get 1 million people to take to see what happens, your doctor probably got a Hawaiian vacation out of that and a nice warm butt slap. Corruption in the medical industry can no longer be ignored. There's no doubt that much of what is told to the masses, including the medical schools and physicians, and don't forget the biopharma industry also finances a lot of what's going on in the medical schools, is simply untrue. Even Dr. Richard Horton editor of the world's most respected medical journal, Lancet, agrees, quote, much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue, afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn towards darkness. Absolutely. And then the guys that are in charge, the guys who are trying to manipulate the belief of the masses, point to all these fraudulent studies and say, you anti-vaxxer, are anti-science, uneducated podunks that don't know anything. And I mean, literally, that's what they're saying. Now they are talking, I think we talked about this briefly the one day, people who decide to opt out and pull their kids out of school because they don't want their children to get these mandatory vaccines since they got rid of the exemptions. Now they want to make it mandatory for CPS to start investigating homeschooling families on a regular basis. And this is just such a slippery slope that is going to take us to the point where mama bears aren't going to put up with this. I'm telling you. And as more and more children end up vaccine damaged and more studies come out, there was one that Heather Callahan had done a story on the other day about the whooping cough vaccine. And now there's huge concern because studies are showing that this huge resurgence of whooping cough, guess what? They're thinking the huge resurgence of whooping cough actually came from the whooping cough vaccine itself and the children who got the vaccine shedding the virus. Hey, but they act like they didn't know that before. We've known that forever. And even the damn chicken farmers were bitching about the new bird flu vaccine and how the birds getting the vaccine would shed the virus and get more chickens sick. So how on earth do these vaccine researchers pretend like they'd never heard of this phenomenon? And all of these, you wouldn't even believe some of the kickback that we were seeing in the comments from these nasty, militant, leftist bitches about, what are you, a fucking idiot? Like, literally, that's what this chick put in the notes to Heather's story. Can't you fucking read? That's what it said. So I gave it right back to this bitch. I'm like, I can read, and I'll tell you what it says. And I literally copy and pasted, and it says, well, yeah, pretty much. We're thinking that it's coming from shedding the virus in the vaccine. It's just unbelievable. But what they've done is they've taken science, but bastardized science, and they've convinced these people who don't understand science that their false science is correct. But those of us who do understand science are the ones that the establishment are pointing our fingers at and telling everybody that we're the ones who just don't get it, the podunks that are working on pseudoscience bullshit. This gets me very angry, but this agenda is just so massive now. So anyway, here, we're going to read a couple more quotes, and then I want to get to our federal government poisoning the people of California. And don't think, once it's been done once and they got away with it, don't think that they're not doing it now. And anything that they're telling you right now is a fucking lie. I don't think that there's anything that I would truly believe 100% anymore. Anyway, and that's exactly what this says. Dr. Marcia Angel, a physician and longtime editor-in-chief of the New England Medicine Journal, which also is one of the most prestigious peer-reviewed medical journals in the world, shares a similar opinion. Quote, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, what the hell does that say to you? She even says, don't trust your doctors. And I've talked about my own personal battles that I've had not only with my child's doctor, but with the dentist and the forced medical procedures. and them trying to force my child into a panoramic x-ray when even the American Dental Association's website talks about the much higher incidence of brain cancers in children under 10 that receive this x-ray. And there's all these studies now showing that it causes brain cancer. And there have been all kinds of studies saying you should never get this x-ray unless it is absolutely medically necessary. But hey, the dentists are trying to pay for their newfangled fancy machine, and he's got to send his kid to college, so he doesn't give two shits about your kid. Collateral damage 20 years from now, no one will know it was my x-ray machine, so I feel better and I can sleep at night. It says in a recent statement published by The Lancet, Dr. Horton bluntly states that the falsities and manipulated research results are starting to plague the industry of biomedicine. Oh, really? Quote, the apparent endemicity of bad research behavior is alarming. In their quest for telling a compelling story, scientists too often sculpt their data to fit their preferred theory of the world. Well, how amazing is that? Because that's what the supposed quote-unquote smart guys are saying about people like me, that I am sculpting my vision to fit my theory of the world against the bad guys. But guess what? We're the ones who were right all along, and isn't that the way it always works out? The quote-unquote conspiracy theorists actually were right, that they were trying to pull a fast one. And it's going to get worse. Don't think. I mean, they have started now this divide and conquer and backers versus anti-backers, and now they're passing these laws, and no one has any freaking idea what they're doing. It's not going to happen. Don't fall for it. It says in their quest for telling a compelling story, scientists too often sculpt their data to fit their preferred theory of the world, or they retrofit hypotheses to fit their data. Journal editors deserve their fair share of criticism too. We aid and abet the worst behaviors. Our acquiescence to the impact factor fuels an unhealthy competition to win a place in a select few journals. And our love of, quote, significance, yes, the narcissism, pollutes the literature with many a statistical fairy tale. We reject important confirmations, and journals are not the only miscreants. Universities, yes, funded many times by Big Pharma and, DARPA. Universities are in a perpetual struggle for money and talent, endpoints that foster reductive metrics such as high-impact publications. Individual scientists, including their most senior leaders, do little to alter a research culture that occasionally veers close to misconduct. The very last quote out of this that I'm going to read. Vaccine manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, and health authorities have known about multiple dangers associated with vaccines, but choose to withhold them from the public. Because guess what? If they didn't, lawsuits. But wait, I don't think we can even sue them anymore. You have to go to that big conglomerate and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was their vaccine that harmed your child and not something else in the environment. And if on the very small chance that you might win a settlement, it's only, I don't remember what the amount is, it was capped at $100,000, few $100,000, and that doesn't get your kid back. Remember, April and Verstein, the Confessions of an RX drug pusher. It is cheaper for them to go balls out with their medications and have a few ancillary people end up getting sick and dying and having to pay them off than it is to do the proper research and get the proper information out there to people and have the criticism. It says this scientific fraud and their complicity suggests that this practice continues to this day. And this is Dr. Lucija Tomanekoff, University of British Columbia's Neurodynamics Research Group in the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences. Don't believe anything they tell you and that they're trying to convince you is true. Anything that they try so hard at to go after, and you know it, you see it. When they start attacking people in public, you know that it's a lie. All right, last story for the day. We got about 10, 12 minutes. It's called Blood and Fog, the military's germ warfare tests in San Francisco. This was June 28th, 2 days ago, out of Discover magazine. I can't even believe such a mainstream publication published a story like this, but this just fits everything that we've been talking about. The Nuremberg Code was drafted in 1947 following the appalling revelations of human experimentation committed in Nazi concentration camps. The overarching goal of the code was to establish a set of rules for ethical conduct of research using human subjects, guaranteeing that the rights and welfare of such participants will be protected. Yes, and how they get around that now. Here's a couple things I want to talk about. They mention Nixon inking, getting rid of the germ warfare in 1969. It went through 1972 as we inked onto that agreement. But here's the thing. We also read in the history of biowarfare that we were determined then to stay on a defensive end of biowarfare by producing vaccinations. But remember, to produce a vaccination, you have to have the pathogen to begin with. And as now the federal government and all of these research institutions are in bed with biopharma, and we have this whole medical industrial complex that's making a lot of people a lot of money, not just in the United States, but globally. Just remember that when they have all of these vaccines and drugs in the pipeline, a lot of them haven't yet gone to quote unquote human trials. And so we've seen time and time again what happens when, I don't know, if 5 or 6 companies have an Ebola drug that's waiting to go to human trials, but hey, there isn't any Ebola. Oh, look, holy shit, we have an outbreak. And now we declare an emergency, and now we get to fast track it all through the FDA, and we can start stabbing people in the arm with it to see what happens. Or what? Oh, we have an outbreak in Africa. Or, India, Pakistan, where people don't have even the minimal protections that we do, and then we send in an international agency like the UN or the Red Cross or the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation to start injecting brown people to see what happens. Anyway, back to the story. 2 important principles guide and define this code, and this is the Nuremberg Code. 1, the concept of voluntary informed consent. Yes, and that's where they're suing now. There were a couple thousand Indian girls' families that were suing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for that very thing because they gave them a document to have them ink it for informed consent. And there wasn't informed consent for the Gardasil vaccine. There were so many of these girls that got sick and a bunch died. And now there's a big lawsuit. Oh, what? In Africa, I think we read, didn't we actually play a clip? It was like I don't know. I'm going to say 20, 30-page document all about the risks involved with the Ebola vaccine. And they had these, Sierra Leoneans or Liberians, I don't even remember the countries. It seems like eons ago since we had the Ebola outbreak. But they had all these people that probably couldn't read 20 pages of English if their life depended on it, putting a big red X for their informed consent to get their Ebola vaccine. So, talk about dirty freaking tactics. But yeah, so there's the concept with quotes around it, of voluntary informed consent, and that no experiment shall be conducted in which, quote, there is an a priori reason to believe that death or disabling injury will occur, unquote. And I'm going to add to that, unless there is a case of national emergency, right? Because that's kind of how it happens now. It says just 4 short years later, so this would be in 1952, the government of the United States would violate this code, surprise, as it undertook one of the largest human experiments in history, spraying the city of San Francisco with a microbe, Serratia markensis. I don't know. I'll spell it for you guys who want to look it up. Serratia, second word, Marcescens. Serratia Mariskians or something in a simulated germ warfare attack. The genus Serratia is a group of soil and water dwelling microbes with one pretty neat party trick. It manufactures a red pigment known as protogeasin, derived from the Latin protogeasis for its marvelous and seemingly supernatural coloring. This color ranges from a lurid vermilion to a washed out pink, depending upon the microbe's age. Whoa, that's interesting, because didn't we have in Alaska not too long ago this weird pink snow showing up everywhere? I believe that we did, and I don't know if they ever actually announced what they thought that was, but it looked like all of the snow had turned pink, and they had kind of postulated that it might have been some sort of bacteria, but I don't think they ever actually came out with a name for it. Huh. Interesting. It says the unique property has been regularly exploited in microbiology as a biological marker tracking metabolic behavior and transmission of bacteria in various environments. And for this reason, this microbe is an ideal tool for such work. I don't know. This is such a long story, and I don't want to run out of time before we get to the important stuff. This bug has a fondness for starchy foods. It was recognized as early as the 6th century BC, where philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras noted the presence of what appeared to be unusual spots of crimson blood forming on bread. It was proposed that Serratia's proclivity for starch may have contributed to the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation, where the bread of the Eucharist represents the blood of Christ. Oh, how interesting is that? Blah, 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 blah. It was this same curious habit of pigment production that was exploited by the U.S. military amidst a cooling atmosphere of the Soviet Union relations in the 1950s. The flashy Serratia was used as the model organism in a simulated germ warfare attack known as Operation Sea Spray. The goal? Well, it was a vulnerability test to identify susceptible regions in the event of a biological terror attack. They were doing this back in 1952. Don't think that they're not doing this shit now, as large groups of us end up with these lung plagues or whatever that then they're trying to blame on, all these anti-vaxxers. I think they're literally spraying this shit. And this is not the first experiment that I've read about where they've sprayed large populations with a pathogen to see what would happen. San Francisco was chosen for its unique geography and proximity to the ocean, as well as its dense population and tall buildings throughout its downtown. And over a period of 6 full days in September of 1950, I guess this happened, members of the U.S. Navy sprayed clouds of Serratia from giant hoses aboard a Navy minesweeper drifting 2 miles along the San Francisco coastline. A bacterial fog quickly enveloped and disguised by the region's own mist. And by monitoring the air at 43 scattered sites throughout the region, the Navy found that Serratia bacteria had blown throughout San Francisco and extended to adjacent communities in Albany, Berkeley, Daly City, Colma, Oakland, San Leandro, and Sausalito. In this regard, the experiment was a success. Oh, yes. San Francisco Bay was identified as a highly susceptible region for germ warfare attacks, and quantifiable range for airborne dispersal of microbes was established. In 1951, a military report on the experiment summarized the findings. It was noted that a successful biological warfare attack on this area can be launched from the sea, and that effective dosages can be produced over relatively large areas. Guys, how frightening is this? It was estimated that the city's 800,000 residents each received a heavy dose of Serratia, inhaling millions of bacteria throughout the testing period. And this is without their knowledge, by the way. In its report, the military further concluded that Serratia marsans is also rarely a cause of illness, and the illness resulting is predominantly so trivial that it is used as a stimulant should be continued even over populated areas. However, Serratia can cause illness, and the repercussions of this experiment extended far beyond the slightly foggier week for San Franciscans. A week after the spraying, 11 patients were admitted to the now defunct Stanford University Hospital in San Francisco with severe urinary tract infections resistant to limited antibiotics available in that area. One gentleman who was recovering from prostate surgery developed complications of a heart infection as Serratia colonized his prosthetic heart valves. His is actually the only death in the aftermath of this experiment. Stanford University hospitals culturing the patient's urine on petri dishes found an unusual and unexpected discovery: microbes with a cherry red pigment. Infection with Serratia was so rare that the outbreak was extensively investigated by the university to identify the origins of the scarlet letter bug, and through the source of this unusual organism could not be located despite an exhaustive epidemiological search. Stanford published a report on the outbreak, noting that the isolation of the red pigment producing bacterium from the urine of human beings was of interest at first as a curious clinical observation. But later, the repeated occurrence of this urinary tract infection by this organism with many patients and death in one indicated a potential clinical importance of this bacteria. And what I want to point out is, if you notice, never before seen, and they're doing all this research. We've never seen this outbreak. Look at what's happening right now. I mean, we haven't covered anything in the last week about these never before seen organisms that they're finding all over the freaking place. But how interesting is it that we're having all these outbreaks again, and they just don't know where any of this comes from? Nope, scientists have no idea. It says from 1950 to 1966, the military performed open air testing of potential terrorist weapons at least 239 times in at least 8 American cities, including New York, Key West, and Panama City, Florida, exposing still unknown numbers of Americans to Serratia and other microbial organisms. Guys, if you think that they wouldn't do that to us now, you got some hallucinations you need to get rid of, because I think that's exactly what's going on. All right, we are out of time. Make sure you guys stick around for the rest of Tuesday. We got live radio all day. Next, Lonnie Clark with Post Ignorance. Mr. Chuck O'Celli live at 6 p.m. Eastern. Against the Wall live with JJ at 8. Primer Time with Michael and Nick at 9. Geoengineering Watch with Dane at 10. And Anti-Media Radio with SM Gibson at 11. Everyone have an awesome Tuesday.